No one outside of strategy, MicroStrategy at the time, had said that in general, that we're going to evaluate all economic calculation in Bitcoin, in BTC terms. So we said we're going to sell some equity, we're going to sell debt, we might sell hotels or whatever we can find for Bitcoin. And the market really resonated with that. So it's come in different flavors, and we've tried different things, and the implementation has looked different as we've sort of figured things out. But yeah, I mean, it started with just an idea, and then quickly sort of we caught lightning in a bottle, and it's snowballed into much more.
Can you share a little bit more about the advantage that you have with the company actually being in Japan? Because it's a little bit difficult to invest in Bitcoin due to the tax implications, right? Capital gains tax for spot Bitcoin much higher than if you purchase an equity like Meta.
For us, it's not that simple, and so we reverse engineered that in Japan. It's a moving strike warrant. Technically, it's a stock acquisition right with an exercise price adjustment provision. It's a moving strike warrant is just a simpler way to say it. But what it means is if our stock goes up, it's not a fixed strike. It's not saying, hey, this is a right to buy the stock at 100 and it stays there. If our stock is going up, then this moving strike warrant is going up, and vice versa. And the way it's structured is, we're only selling equity into strength. So when the stock's falling, our counterparty is not selling shares, and we're not exercising shares. So it's a really beneficial plan and execution strategy for our shareholders, and we had tremendous success in the first quarter. Now the past 3 buys, it's been over 1,000 Bitcoin each, which is a lot of money, $100 million. But yeah, it was we've really were taking any tools we could get, right? So we borrowed money against the hotel, and then we did a rights issue. And a rights issue is something that is usually, as a company in real weakness, does a rights issue. It's dilutive. It's some people say it's a gun to the head to your shareholders, because you're basically saying a rights issue is you give every shareholder the right to buy the stock at a discount. So if you don't exercise your right, you get diluted, and usually the stock falls. So usually it's a lose-lose for a rights issue. Shareholders don't like it. For us, we did a rights issue and the stock tripled.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
Incentive to sell shares and exercise. And so, that had never been done before. And then 3, the craziest thing about both of those was that there was this massive dilution event. It was at a premium, 2 things that no one had ever seen before in Japan. And the stock was limit up after hours. So it was like this massive, everybody was talking about it because it was 3 things that were confounding to the market for traditional investors.
Right.
But for our investors, they only want Bitcoin. So when we come out with a plan that says, hey, we want to buy 1% of the Bitcoin supply over the next 30 months.
Yeah, and that's the plan, right? You want 1% of the supply, so 210,000 Bitcoin.
We're saying,
right?
10 to 1 over collateralized. Right now, I think we're 11 to 1 over collateralized. A couple weeks ago, we were 70 to 1 over collateralized, which means that Bitcoin could literally go down 98%. So I think our strategy is to stay, we're going to be aggressive, but at the same time, we're not going to get over our skis in terms of leverage. At least that's the plan. And then 2, in terms of the operating business, there is still the hotel. We still have the hotel, but about 88% of our revenue in the first quarter, operating income of the business, was actually premiums from the Bitcoin options market. So we're getting paid to buy Bitcoin through our treasury operations. And that's a bit, in the weeds, but that's revenue, and that's income for Metaplanet. So it's not only that we're raising capital and buying the Bitcoin, but we're also, that's making its way to the income statement, and it's custodial landscape, but also there's a lot of counterparties, service providers that don't work with Japanese entities. So having an entity in the U.S. Gives us a bit more optionality there, and then also there's could be other plans in the future potentially.
What if those tax laws that are so advantageous to Metaplanet right now in Japan were to change? What if all of a sudden there wasn't that tailwind? Are you concerned about that at all?
No. I think that, there's a lot of stuff like, right now there's no ETFs. People said with MicroStrategy, when the ETFs come out, the MNAV's going to go down and there's going to be no need for strategy. What actually happened was the MNAV went up, the premium to the net asset value went up. So I think the tax laws will, they're eventually going to change. I don't know when. It's the same security as the Japanese listing, just traded in these other markets. And so there was a few days last week where we were like top 3 traded stock in Japan in terms of liquidity. One of the days we were 1, right? So the giants of industry in Japan, and little old Metaplanet is trading more, right? So that gives us a ton of options in terms of how we're going to raise capital. I would like to say that a few years ago I saw this all coming. I sort of thought the secret sauce was the convertible bonds, and I was a bit naive to the capital markets at that point. But in terms of the preferred offerings, this is clear where I think, not to say the convertible bond era is over for Strategy. They still have some outstanding. They might do another one day. But I think, Strategy essentially hit their cap. They hit the ceiling in terms of like how big that market was. They were the biggest player by far globally of convertible bond. They engineer BTC yields depending on the market condition. And that's really, really unique. I don't think a lot of people, I'm still, the more I think about it, right? Like the preferreds, especially the non-convertible preferreds, it's like a perpetual Bitcoin dollar swap. It's Bitcoin dollar swap contract being sold into the bond market. Like this is a huge idea. And it's much more, in my opinion, scalable than the convertible bond offerings, right? It's debt that never comes due. There's a dividend every year, but the principal never comes due, right? It's like, would you borrow money forever to not pay it back? It's like, right. I wish I could do that. Who knows what those rates will, but I think the simplest way to think of it is Stride is junk grade debt. Strife is investment grade debt. Strike is in the middle of those two. Strike is, they call it a Bitcoin with a fellowship, right? It's you get Bitcoin exposure because there's a conversion, there's a call option, right? It's like you have a bond and then you have a call option on MicroStrategy for 100 years. And they're combined, right? So the interesting thing with Strike is, if you go on Robinhood or your TD, Ameritrade app or whatnot, and you click on the options for MicroStrategy, $1,000 call option for next year is like actually pretty pricey. It's like it's expensive, right? Because 1 year out, it's a volatile stock, anything can happen. Strike takes, it's a $1,000 call option that never expires. It's perpetual. Right? We're going to create asset-backed credit. Instead of cash flow backed credit instruments, future discounted cash flow backed instruments. So that's the game that's being played. That's the mission, and stuff like getting a credit rating agency to give a credit rating to these instruments is the next battle. So it's an exciting one. I think 10 years from now, 20 years from now, financial historians will look back and say, okay, wow, that was an inflection point in Bitcoin and the rise of something that we all agree now was inevitable. But right now it flies in the face of traditional wisdom, which is why it's so polarizing. We know this, of course. You let the market set the price. And then when you have, central banks at the price of money, no one asks questions. And so, I think for those that can step back and see what's actually unfolding, you see Bitcoin's just this it's a monetary system that's engineered, that is perfect. The denominator doesn't change. This. We all know this as Bitcoiners. And so that's competing in parallel to the centrally planned price of money, and on a month, quarter, year, decade-long time frame, the results speak for themselves. So anybody that can step back and say, yeah, the volatility doesn't bother me. I'm just gonna.
But there are people who watch or who listen who are still kind of immersed in fiat or TradFi, and they're not seeing it. Like, they don't understand how much this is going to completely turn things upside down. And everything, the benchmark is the US 10-year, right? And so Michael Saylor, and I'm sure other companies will create innovative products. They're coming in and saying the capital's mispriced, and so I have the ability now to issue these creative kind of products, right? And I think that people aren't realizing what they even are yet.
Yeah, I think most does, which is continue to remain certain at 21 million and not change, and there's a wave of global demand. Then, the bond market, which the fiat currency system, as has to expand forever. And so, you're issuing these Bitcoin-backed credit instruments. Yeah, even if you're paying 8%, 9%, 10%, depending on the issuance, I think that something like Strife should trade closer to the U.S. government rate of 4 or 5%. 6%. It should be investment grade. Right now, the market is, I think, underpricing these things dramatically. So there's a lot of upside there, and there's a lot of money. There's a lot of, with the hotel industry before pivoting. Apple with $100 billion of cash, or Facebook like that. Facebook just declined the Bitcoin proposal with a 90% veto.
Yeah.
No vote. So I actually don't think FANG is going to go huge, or Mag 7 is going to go huge into Bitcoin. I mean, Tesla owns 10,000 Bitcoin, but no, I don't think that. I think the Bitcoin treasury companies, the companies that are going all in, or the ones that already have a strategy, or the companies that are, it's a need to know basis, as Saylor and others have said.
That's very true. Well, I recently joined the board of Semler.
Congratulations.
I'm really excited about, thank you, our very bold strategy going forward. I would just love to hear your thoughts on Semler Scientific.
Yeah, I had a wonderful breakfast with Eric yesterday, and we had a great panel. It's amazing because I think independent of
businesses matter, in your opinion, especially, let's say, when we do have a downturn. If a company has sort of a two-pronged narrative and has a very strong core business that's generating income and cash flow in addition to the Bitcoin, or do you think the Bitcoin is really what matters and what investors care about?
I think there's different flavors. For us at Metaplanet, I found, and I sort of tell this to other people that are just kind of want my take on things, but I found the more complexity and the more sort of layers to the story, the less interested people are. So it's when we were talking in the early days of Metaplanet, it's so we should do Bitcoin plus what? Bitcoin and this or Bitcoin and that. And eventually I was I think the story is just Bitcoin. So I think a strong core business is very helpful. But to be honest, realistically, if I said, what does success look like for, and everybody cheers and they get added to the leaderboard list of Bitcoin holders, and right, I mean, you don't really see anybody comparing cash balances for public companies on, the Bloomberg guys are posting, Nike just stacked more T-bills.
Right.
It's more of just this is a corporation that's undergoing an operation.
Sure.
So 10 years from now, I think Bitcoin is repriced an order of magnitude or 2 orders of magnitude higher, 10x or 100x higher in fiat terms. I think the Bitcoiners are right. They're on the right side of history, and I think Bitcoin treasury companies are going to be the most valuable companies in the world. Whether that's because the most valuable companies adopt Bitcoin, or because the companies that adopted Bitcoin, thrust up to be the most valuable. Probably both of those in tandem.
We're going to be accounting fiat in the quadrillions at that point.
Yeah.
It's we're getting close to
that
point.
Yeah. No kidding.
Well, before we start to wrap up, would love to get a little bit of your macro take.
Like, subscribe, and turn on notifications. Support the channel by liking this video, subscribing, and enabling post notifications for more content on crypto and digital assets. Check out our other videos and share your thoughts in the comments below. Your engagement helps with the YouTube algorithm and keeps the content coming. Thanks for your support. Enjoy the video.